Hi everybody, Ryan Barath here once again, and today we are in my build shop and I'm going to show you how to assemble an iron. What makes an iron unique is the amount of parts that go into it are slightly different, because unlike a driver or a fairway wood, in most cases, or even a putter, we're not dealing with a ferrule, we're not dealing with a tip weight, and those are all components that go into making sure that an iron gets to the right specs at the end of the build process. Those things require having the right shaft, having the right length of that shaft, having the right head weight, lie loft, all of those things. But today we're really gonna focus on the assembly and then the final step, which is the gripping process. With my irons, I really do prefer to use an align style grip or a minder grip or a rib grip. With the case of Golf Pride, they call it the Align. It's also very easy because if you are putting them on, they are easy to, no pun intended, align properly. We're gonna show you the gripping process after, and we're going to get into the assembly now. I've got the shaft. The shaft has been cleaned and prepped using my belt sander. I've got a club head, same thing. The inside of the head has been cleaned and we are replacing a shaft from a club that just needs a new one. Ferrule. Now, you might think to yourself, where else would I ever use the word ferrule in my life? You know the little piece that holds the eraser onto your pencil, that little metal thing? That's also called a ferrule. There you go, you can take that to your next little trivia game, all right? And we have our tip weights. Now, this isn't the case for all irons, some might not need them, but in the case of most iron assembly, they do require tip weights. So let's get started on this process. First and foremost, we're using epoxy. I'm using a syringe. Some cases, this is a two-part epoxy. Sometimes you'll see separate bottles where you might weigh it to make sure that you're getting the right mix. The thing that I love about using the syringe when I am doing either one or two golf clubs is the fact that I know that I'm going to get the same mix every single time. So if it's your first time building golf clubs, or you're someone who just wants to have something separate from your normal set like type of epoxy, having a two-part in a syringe just makes that job so much easier. I'm going to mix this out here. You do not need a lot. You need roughly, per golf club, I would say something about the size of a pea, and that's really all you need. One of the biggest mistakes most people make is actually they use too much epoxy. Too much epoxy goes up the shaft as you are going through the assembly process, and then when you have too much epoxy in there, it can break off and create a rattle. Or if there's so much mass in the bottom of the club, you can actually affect the balance of the golf club, how it feels, and a lot of other things that we really don't want to change as you're going through that process. Now what you'll notice here is I'm not sitting here whipping this epoxy like I'm scrambling eggs, okay? That is not the point of doing this. The whole point is to just steadily mix it. So what ends up happening is you get a really good solid blend with the epoxy and you're not getting air in it. Just by mixing it slowly and just letting it kind of spread out almost, you're going to get a better mix and you're going to really prevent the possibility of having extra air trapped in the epoxy, creating other issues down the line. So now that this is mixed, I'm gonna let it sit for just a moment. What you'll notice here is I've got some quick center and some glass shafting beads. You don't always need to use this. I like to use a little bit of the glass shafting beads when I'm doing iron sets. It just helps make sure everything's just nice and centered, nice and snug. I just want to cover roughly 1/4 of that surface area with a little bit. Now see, too much came out. Problem. Not really, and I'll show you how to solve it. I'm still only covering roughly 1/4 of it, but it's not stuck to the epoxy. It hasn't worked its way in. So what you do is if you get a little extra, problem solved. It's just that easy, okay? I don't always like solving problems in real time, but that is part of the club building process is, okay, well, we had a little bit of an accident, a little bit too much salt and pepper in our dish here. How are we gonna fix it? Well, in this case, we can just dump the extra in the garbage because it was just sitting on top. If I was mixing it while doing it, probably have a problem. But in this case, simple fix and we can continue on with the club building process. So now, club head's clean, barrel's ready to go, tip weight and shaft. Here is the process of putting all of these things together. Number one, ferrule goes on with just a little tiny, tiny, tiny dab of epoxy on the shaft. Get it inside, twist that ferrule on, and it will start to get snug. I do not need to push it all the way down. I know that there is epoxy in there, so it's not going to slide after the fact. And then I take a tiny little bit of my blue shop towel here, and I clean the top of the ferrule. Not a lot of epoxy came off there, which means it's good. It's mostly between the ferrule and the shaft. Next up, I put the tip weight in first. So We got the ferrule on about 1/2 inch, which is not the full insertion depth of the iron head. I add a little bit of epoxy. Again, you do not need a lot, roughly the size of a pea, because that will hold the rest of it in place. You'll see some of it sneak out already. Then I'm going to dunk the end of the shaft in that epoxy. And now I will put that on the rest of the way. Tip weight is still in the shaft. I can see that there's epoxy on both sides. There is really not a lot of epoxy in the club head, although the shaft is lightly coated. And again, we're just going to take that. What I'll do is I like to just set it here. I can collect some of the epoxy with the popsicle stick that I have. Coat the shaft. It's not a lot. And then use that little extra before going all the way on. I like to twist it in there. Now before I get to the final part where I'm just about to seat it at the bottom, I can see extra epoxy. I know that there's extra epoxy in there that's going to come out. So to help prevent that, I will use, again, the blue shop towel. And you can see here under the light, if you want to come in close, there's a little bit of extra epoxy in there. That's a good thing. That's fine, because there's a little bit of coning there, so it's going to take up that area. So when I push it together, that extra comes out. Nothing wrong with a little bit of extra epoxy. I'd rather it come out than work its way up the shaft, as I previously explained. I'm going to wipe it clean. Wipe it clean again. Like anything in life, it's kind of like the prep work. The more prep work that you do in making sure that this is clean, when you get to once the epoxy is dry and you go to turn the ferrule down, it becomes a heck of a lot easier. So I get my acetone here. I make sure that it's seated in the bottom. I give it a quick wipe, a couple wipes. Once I set the shaft up against the wall, I'll get my little flashlight out and I'll look around and I'll just make sure that there's no gap between that ferrule and that hosel. Okay, so while that golf club is up against the wall, we're going to clean up this little mess here. We're going to wait for this epoxy to dry, and then we're going to head over to the gripping station to install the grip and go through that process, talk our way through it, and talk our way through a little bit more selecting the right grip for you. Okay, so now that the epoxy has cured for the iron, we're going to go through the process of finishing it off, which means turning the ferrule down, which I'll show you how I go through that process, and then we're going to put the grip on. I'm going to show you a couple little tricks to make sure if you are using a non-360 grip, how to make sure that you get it nice and square and aligned properly. So let's go over here. We're going to turn this ferrule down first. I've talked about this before, but the key is constant turning and light pressure. And just like that. Telltale sign of making sure that a good ferrule is done properly is you feel no lip between the metal hosel and the plastic part of the ferrule. Now what I will do to clean this up, because there is just a little bit of residue along that transition point, is I will take my straight blade from my knife and very, very, very delicately just run it along that transition line. I will use a Scotch-Brite pad. What I like to do is I just give it a quick little run around here. Put on my glove. It's important too, if you can, put on a glove when going through this process, because I'm really going to saturate this blue shop towel to get it to the point where I'm able to turn this ferrule down, and it's going to create a nice smooth surface. So I got my glove on here, saturate the blue shop towel, acetone, really quick. And then the fun thing is, if you did a really good job, you'll actually see the entire pattern of the ferrule on your blue shop towel. Yeah, it's kind of odd, but yeah, it's kind of fun. At least you know you did it right. And that way too, you're not getting any color blending on the ferrule either. Just the little detail stuff that's kind of nerdy and fun to pay attention to. And now we have this beautiful, shiny ferrule. The transition is clean. It's nice and polished. It looks great. Now it's ready just to throw that grip on here. I have a gripping station. And when we think about most grips, now I have here the Z cord, is I want to make sure that I am aligning everything correctly. And a way to do this is if you're looking at this grip as an example, or you're using one of the different grips from Golf Pride that happens to have the align on the back of it, you want to align the top. And then once you put it onto the grip, you can actually look underneath to make sure that that line is on there straight. Get those grooves straight up and down, or the leading edge straight up and down. Get the tape about an inch past the end of the grip there. Put it into my gripping station. Some people will go past and then cut the tape off. I personally, like, especially if I'm just doing one layer, I kind of mark to right there on the bottom of the grip. That way I don't get any coverage, and it just allows for some more consistency through the build process. Put the tape on. Make sure I have no ridges. You can see here there's about 1.5 inches of tape left over. You can, if you want to, you can roll it up and jam it in the grip. I don't really like doing that, because what happens is if you push too much in there, you actually change the length of the golf club if you don't get the grip all the way on. So I like to just cut roughly 1/4 to 1/2 inch. Make sure that it's sealed, pinch it off, push it in, and now it's time to put the grip on. One thing I want to do is make sure that the grip is on straight. So I'm going to use a lot of solvent. With the gripping station, I recycle the solvent. So I don't have to worry about, oh, I'm using extra, I'm just wasting it. No, it's going to go back in, and one day I'll fill this bottle back up again. So I start, put the end of the grip on the nozzle of the spray gun, and just start spraying down. I know that the inside of this grip is getting saturated, as well as the tape that is on the shaft here. You know, I'm going to use this because if I'm spraying and there's pressure, it's going to spray at me. I don't want that. So push that on, use the towel to prevent any spray, and then I push it all the way on to the end of the shaft. So I will use the top alignment marker that even says Golf Pride on the top of this grip. I will use the alignment down the end of the grip, and I will use the alignment on the bottom as well as the logo. If you are doing logo down, you are putting the Golf Pride on the bottom. You still have the graphics on the grip as well as the line on the top and the bottom to make sure that the grip is on square. I will kind of eye it up, make sure it's all square, make sure everything's down on the top. And then one last thing is I give it a good push, make sure it's all the way on. And then the last and final step, which I like to do, is just give it a little push onto a towel to make sure that it's seated. Push down with your body weight just to make sure that you can feel the shaft on the end of the grip. Check it. Give it one of these to make sure that there's no budging in that grip so it is all the way seated. Give it the old eye test, and you are ready to rock. And that is just how easy it is to make sure that you install a grip on straight. Make sure that it is all the way on the end of the golf club. You repeat this step 13 times on all your clubs, you're going to have every single grip on just the way that it should be. So when you go to the golf course, you know that you can be confident with every single swing, because the golf grip is the only connection you have between you and your golf clubs. And the more confident in that, the more confident you're going to make swings, and hopefully the better golf you're going to play. So hopefully you found this useful. As always, I'm Ryan Barath, and thanks for watching.